What you're advocating for and what enhanced games is all about is that there's a next level sort of human evolution in the field of professional sports.
Enhanced games are just the third version of the Olympic Games. So there was the original Olympiad of ancient Greece, a pagan celebration. It was only men. It was a religious festival. And then for 2,000 years, there was nothing. It was reinvented in 1896 by Baron Pierre de Coubertin for his era. We are reinventing the Olympics for the third time, for an era of science, an era of technology, where I believe human beings will no longer be limited by our biology.
Episode 102, Stay Classy Podcast. Here we go. Aron D'Souza, thanks for coming on to the show. Happy to have you here. So normally I don't do these sort of longer intros, but I think Aron deserves it because of the accomplishments, the credentials, and also just to introduce this topic a little bit. So Aron is actually the president of Enhanced Games, which is an annual elite sporting event inspired by the Olympics that embraces the regulated and medically supervised use of performance enhancements. Wow, that was a mouthful. Prior to founding the Enhanced Games, Dr. D'Souza co-founded Open, a venture capital fund backed by the New York Stock Exchange, and he also helped lead Peter Thiel's litigation against Gawker Media, which involved the wrestler Hulk Hogan, who I'm familiar with growing up watching WWE, but which resulted in one of the largest invasion of privacy judgments in history. And the first Enhanced Games are set to be held in the United States in 2025, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Dr. D'Souza is focused on catalyzing the next evolution of humanity by demonstrating the true potential of the human body, which for people who might get lost in the jargon there, I kind of want to break it down, and then feel free to correct me, Dr. D'Souza. But basically, what you're advocating for and what Enhanced Games is all about is that there's a next level sort of human evolution in the field of professional sports, Olympics, athletic competitions that can be unlocked through, the sort of deregulation of prohibited substances. Is that sort of an accurate assessment? Like for people who are completely unfamiliar with this topic, can you briefly explain and articulate what is Enhanced Games?
Enhanced Games are just the third version of the Olympic Games. So there was the original Olympiad of ancient Greece, a pagan celebration. It was only men. It was a religious festival. And then for 2,000 years, there was nothing. It was reinvented in 1896 by Baron Pierre de Coubertin for his era, an era of the steamship, an era of nationalism, an era of empire. And we are reinventing the Olympics for the third time, for an era of science, an era of technology, where I believe human beings will no longer be limited by our biology, right?
Yeah.
And that's the goal of the enhanced, so that we can become superhuman, overcome our biological limits through technology and science. And that science today is performance enhancing drugs,
Sure.
like steroids, testosterone, EPO, etc. But in time will be things like CRISPR gene editing technology, brain computer interfaces, and so many of the vanguard technologies that are in the laboratory today that will soon be on the track or in the pool, and then available for every single person in the whole world. Is the same drugs that allow an athlete to faster or jump higher or run faster are the same drugs that allow older people to live stronger, healthier, more productive lives.
Sure. So I think it would be then a big oversimplification to say that you're sort of espousing the view that, someone watching a UFC fight or something would say, hey, just screw, pump them up full of steroids and let them go at it. It's a little more complex, right? There's a lot more to it than just pumping up, fighters with steroids or something. You're advocating for a more general philosophical, conceptual view of how humanity and athletics could be in the future than just, injecting someone full of steroids and seeing what happens, right?
This is not just about sport. It's about medicine and the human species. So you're a smart guy. Do you know what the legal definition of medicine is?
The legal definition of medicine?
The legal definition of medicine. Do you know
I can't say I do.
Very few people do. I talk to doctors and regulators all the time, and they don't know what medicine is. The legal definition of medicine was created in the early 20th century because before then, anyone could call themselves a doctor. But Andrew Carnegie, the philanthropist, commissioned Albert Flexner, a sociologist from Johns Hopkins University, to survey medical education in America. And they concluded that, to be a doctor, you should go to school, you should pass a test and be a board certified physician. But as part of that process, they had to determine what medicine is. And the legal definition of medicine is for the treatment and amelioration of illness, to make sick people less sick.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But what about being ordinary people and making them extraordinary?
Mm.
Medicine legally not allowed to do that. And I think this is one of the greatest failings in our society. And I know that Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is our new Secretary of Health and Human Services, is very interested in this concept. Because ultimately, medicine should do much more than treating the sick. It should also make us better and stronger humans.
Sure.
At every
So,
stage.
yeah, sorry. I was just going to ask, so in that vein, then, is there so I know Enhanced Games has some very specific standards because I was looking at, the research you guys have done and, your statement and your framework that you've articulated in terms of what you do and do not condone when it comes to these substances. So is there a specific list or sort of outline of that Enhanced Games says, hey, we do approve and condone and even support that athletes would be able to utilize certain kinds of substances to enhance their athletic ability, but we specifically do not condone and we, in fact, would discourage these other set of substances. Has it been articulated to that detail, or is that still a work in progress?
So in December, we convened a group of the top scientists in the world at Oxford University and adopted the first declaration on human enhancement.
Okay.
It's 10 simple principles that guide exactly the questions that you have asked. So the first article is about the right of bodily sovereignty. And I think this is the most fundamental of human rights. Every individual, adult, with free and informed consent should be able to do to their body what they wish. And what that means is that we should be able to enhance ourselves how we wish. The limitation, however, is about what is legal. In any given country or jurisdiction which one participates in, only substances which are legally available are allowed. So individuals have to respect the sovereignty of nations.
Okay.
But the point that I would make is a lot of individuals will convolute a banned or prohibited substance with an illegal one. That's not true. 25% of the goods on the shelf at GNC will get you banned from Olympic competition. Virtually all the compounds that are on the World Anti-Doping Agency and the Olympics ban list are available under prescription or from a doctor.
Yeah.
Even the substances like testosterone replacement therapy, synthetic growth hormones, that are being used by people like Secretary Kennedy will get him banned from Olympic competition.
Okay, that makes sense. So, because I was looking at some of the, the articles that have been published about this that I'm sure you're familiar with, and some of the criticisms in, the last year or so since you started to, really make your media presence, and you were on the Joe Rogan podcast, and so people have been looking into this, and one of the things that came up was concerns over obviously side effects and potential side effects from substances that would be utilized by athletes in Enhanced Games, and specifically there were concerns over amphetamines. There were also concerns over testosterone, and with the amphetamines, for instance, like there was this notion that if you have an athlete, say that's on amphetamines of some kind, that's competing on a really hot day, and they're exerting themselves so much that they could possibly overexert themselves and die of heat stroke because they're not paying attention to the warning signs in their body as much because they're on the substance. Or with testosterone, like there's worries about muscle growth, which is obviously I'm more familiar with that because of the world of weightlifting, bodybuilding, and that sort of thing, having interviewed people in that world. So as far as substances that have amphetamines or testosterone, like are there specific guidelines that you guys have developed to say, hey, like this is how we're going to monitor, control, and ensure athlete safety, and can that actually be done effectively?
So, and let's be very clear. Drug testing at the Olympic Games is not about safety. It's about fairness. Lance Armstrong can't use the super steroids if the other athletes can't use them. The correct route is to build a safety-focused system, not a fairness-focused system. And in the safety-focused system, whether you're competing as a natural or an enhanced athlete, the correct thing to do is pre-competition health screening. So the vast majority of risks, which you are outlining, are cardiac risk, right? If someone has a pre-existing cardiac condition and they take amphetamines, that is a very bad, can lead to very bad outcomes,
Yeah.
right? And so how do we monitor for this? Is pre-competition full system health checkups, MRIs, cardiac monitoring, blood panels, to ensure that an athlete is healthy to compete. And I will always emphasize that athletes who are natural, i.e. they don't take any performance enhancements, or that they are enhanced, are welcome to compete at the enhanced games. But everyone who participates has to pass a health checkup.
Okay. So does the so as far as, because one of the things that I noticed that you brought up multiple times in previous interviews was, and I want to elaborate on this a bit more, is like there is currently a lot of obviously undetected doping, quote unquote, that's going on among athletes already, both in professional sports such as UFC, whether it's NFL or the Olympic Games. So you estimated, or Enhanced Games estimated, that that's as high as like 44% among professional athletes, while only 1% of these athletes are actually getting, caught in the act, as it were. Is that kind of an accurate assessment of?
Let me
Go ahead.
No, so that is not research that we conducted. That was research conducted and funded by the World Anti-Doping Agency and the International Olympic Committee. It was led by a group of professors from Harvard and published in the Journal of Sports Biology. So 44% of elite athletes in track and field admit to using banned substances
Okay.
in anonymized reporting, yet only 1% get caught. The whole system of drug testing is completely broken. You would have seen just before the Paris Olympics, the New York Times broke the story of 23 Chinese swimmers who are very clearly using a banned heart medication called TMZ. And they were allowed to compete because of pressure, commercial pressures from the Chinese government and major sponsors.
Yeah. So it's like the implications of that are huge, right? Because the arguments that are being made against enhanced games have to do with, well, compromising integrity and fairness, but that kind of presupposes that it's, fair and equitable as it is. But the reality that is indicated by this research is that it's not equitable at all. In fact, like the cheating, as it would say, is like rampant already. Like the doping is rampant, and that was 44%, by the way. Those are the people who admitted it. I'd be interested to know, because it's like, there are probably people who didn't admit it, even because they were being surveyed anonymously because they were ashamed or were embarrassed. But 44% that we know of these athletes were saying that they had been doping, that they had been breaking the rules. So the system, as it stands, is already broken. So you're essentially coming in here and saying, hey, like, acknowledging this reality, acknowledging that these anti-doping efforts aren't working, that athletes have ways to avoid detection. Let's just acknowledge it for what it is and use this as an opportunity to see what humans are capable of in an athletic realm, where we make this safe and equitable for everyone. Is that kind of the implication that you're putting forward?
That's absolutely right. And I always say, the enhanced games aren't the Olympics plus drugs. It's the Olympics plus drugs and money. The International Olympic Committee makes $4.5 billion in revenue per Olympic Games, yet cities pay to host the games, and they will spend tens of billions of dollars building a dozen stadiums that get thrown away after 2 weeks. Yet the athletes of the world don't get paid. Right? It's this crazy where the core value creators don't get paid a cent. And we have committed the athletes that break world records at the enhanced games will earn $1 million.
Yeah.
And we believe that excellence should be rewarded. And I'm very proud of the fact that now, a year and a half into philosophizing and operationalizing this concept, at the Paris Olympics, the World Athletics Federation paid $50,000 for every gold medal in track and field, only because of the economic pressure that we've placed upon them. And you can read about it in the BBC, right? It was only because of our efforts that athletes got paid at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, and on that note, in terms of the financial incentives here, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, Enhanced Games is actually offering prizes to people who break records. And it doesn't have to be. It can even be like somebody who's not in a typical athletic age range, right? Like it could be like a 50 or 60-year-old who's like breaking some kind of track record using, in the context of the enhanced games. You guys are actually offering prizes for these records to be broken. Is that right? Can you tell us about how the reward system would work for enhanced games?
Well, yeah. So what's amazing is, and we've seen this, we have some athletes in training already who are in their late 30s who are swimming, in particular, at world record speed, faster than Michael Phelps ever could, using performance enhancements. Like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it
And
is.
so we are, incentivizing world record potential at every level. And I hope the greatest gift, this is sort of like the crazy thing about our society. We decided quite logically that 18 is when you become an adult. And
Yeah,
there are like obvious reasons for that based on our physiology.
sure.
But do you know, um, 65 is the retirement age?
I actually don't. Enlighten me.
It was made up by because he didn't have enough gold in his treasury to pay his soldiers. So he said to the soldiers, if you get to age 65, I'll pay you a pension for the rest of your life. And all the soldiers were like, brilliant. I'll trade in my little pittance of a pay rise for a full pension.
Sure.
What they didn't know back then, what Napoleon knew, what the soldiers didn't know, is that only 3% of people back then get to age 65.
Yeah, I was gonna
Right.
say it doesn't seem like a life expectancy would.
Exactly. And life expectancy has increased dramatically. And so I think the greatest gift that the enhanced games can give to the world is a 30-year-old, then a 40-year-old, then a 50-year-old, and then eventually a 65-year-old who will be the fastest human in the world. It's going to take decades.
Sure.
Maybe it'll take a century. But we have the technology that's available to us today to radically increase human performance.
And what I'm
Um,
hearing, go.
and
Sorry, go ahead.
and make that available in a much broader way. And that's going to be a game changer. Most guys in particular in their 30s, right? They're stuck in office jobs, they're getting back pain.
Yeah,
They don't think they can be an elite athlete anymore,
yeah.
right? But imagine coming back for a second act using science and technology.
Sure. And what I'm hearing from you is that again, this goes far beyond like we're gonna green light, previously restricted substances for athletic competitions. This to you is also really about research for ways to amplify the human physical condition moving forward, and as you talked about, sort of ameliorate some of the things that just plague us physically on a day-to-day basis as we get older. You're talking about guys in their 30s and as we get older, especially now that we're all sitting in cubicles or in chairs and have back problems, but like the point being is that you're really focused on ways to just absolutely like amplify human strength and physical potential just beyond the substance part. So tell us a little bit about the research and sort of the focus of enhanced games as it relates to aside from just allowing substances to be used that were not allowed.
Well, ultimately, this is a rigorous scientific project.
Sure.
From day one, we have always said that science is first and foremost in every decision that we make. And that's because the data we generate from these athletes will be used to inform the research and development of new pharmaceutical compounds.
Yeah.
And the most valuable company in Europe today is Novo Nordisk. It's worth $600 billion because of one drug, which is Ozempic. And Ozempic and the GLP-1 drugs have added $1 trillion to the market capitalization of their owners. That's more value than all of the AI startups put together. So one enhancement is worth more than all of AI. Get that around your head about how big this industry is. And Ozempic and the GLP-1s is an enhancement drug. 83% of the time in America, it's prescribed off-label. It's a diabetes medication, but people are using it for weight loss. And so just imagine if Lance Armstrong 20 years ago went out and said, you know what, I was dying of cancer a year ago, but now I've just won the Tour de France, all thanks to EPO. That would have been the best-selling drug of all time. And we see the commercial opportunity of building technologies and pharmaceutical products that improve human performance at every level and selling them to the wider world.
Makes sense. I mean, do you think that, uh, like, it seems from what I can tell that you are definitely like the figurehead of this movement, but are there other people, other organizations that are recognizing the potential? Because I mean, there's all seems like if this becomes mainstream in the next couple of decades, that there would be other competitors sort of for your position in this market, or is that not really the case?
Well, there's a first mover advantage.
Sure.
When I started this organization, it was tough, right? The very first round of financing was difficult. Most investors said, "This is too crazy. You're
Yeah.
you're going up against, the International Olympic Committee, one of the most durable and corrupt monopolies that has ever existed."
Yeah.
And our first major investor was Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, one of the longest supporters of President Trump, deep within the administration now.
Yeah.
And they're very like Peter in this world. And the centrality of his importance in the Silicon Valley venture capital ecosystem cannot be understated. And so I don't think that someone else could replicate this, because right now, um, we're the one and the only. Like, you'd be pretty crazy to think you can go up against, the apparatus that we've built and the investor base that we've built. Um, you know,
Sure.
and we're open to collaborate. Lots of people in this world who will say, what, we'll want to do some of the research and development, some of the compound pharmaceuticals, some of the athletic side, but we're here as the Enhanced Games, setting a rule set and an intellectual framework, not just for a company, but for a whole movement that I think will fundamentally reshape what it means to be human. That's why we get up to work every day.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you. So, as far as the origins of this, I mean, because you had quite a, as we were talking about before we started recording, you had a very different sort of career path to this than might be expected. Because you didn't really start out in this field. You started out. You were sort of this very successful entrepreneur. You know the founder of Sargon, and which is became a multi billion dollar company, and you were, as you said, involved with Peter Thiel and the lawsuit against Gawker Media. So you had kind of these other areas and other arenas where you had found success, and then you shifted over to enhanced games. Like, tell me about like kind of the moment that you started to think like this could be the next chapter of my life and sort of my legacy. Like, how did that come about? Like, where maybe it was like an idea originally that sounded like a good idea, but where it went from the drawing board to the rest of your life, basically.
So, yeah, it's good. It very much will dominate, I think, the rest of my life. Um, well, Reed Hastings, who founded Netflix, did not work at Blockbuster. Travis Kalanick, who founded Uber, did not drive taxi cabs. Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal, did not work at a bank, right?
Sure.
And so, approach. There are so many people who could have done this. There's this guy, Julian Savulescu, who is a professor at Oxford University, who in the late 90s wrote the full business plan and argument of the enhanced games. But he was an academic. He couldn't operationalize it,
Yeah.
right? There's so many people who recognize the corruption and the dysfunction inside the sports federations and the International Olympic Committee, but they can't get out of the system. They're in too deep. And so it takes an outsider to disrupt. And I'm absolutely convinced of that. You don't, and my advice to entrepreneurs, you don't need to go and work at Goldman Sachs to build a fintech, right? You don't need to go work at Boeing to build rockets. Right?
Sure.
You can just go and do it. And the best time to start is. And so the origin story of the Enhanced Games is that, every Christmas from the 26th of December to the 1st of January, I take my idea of a holiday.
Okay.
Take my laptop, I go and rent a beautiful house on the beach somewhere, and I write the business plan for an idea that I've had in the past year, whether that's business or a philanthropic effort. And I don't talk about my ideas; I write about my ideas. And writing is it's very easy to think about ideas. It's very easy to shoot the breeze with your friends at the pub about an idea. But when there's a blank sheet of paper in front of you, it's tough,
Yeah.
right? And so I take 5 or 6 every year, and I write about one idea that I want to turn into reality. Because the first step of taking an idea into reality is writing it down. And in 2022, I rented a beautiful penthouse in Miami, and I said, okay, I'm going to write the idea of the new Olympics. I've always been inspired by Olympus. I think it's a really special gathering of humanity.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of problems when 44% of the athletes are doping, when they bankrupted country after country with
Sure.
useless infrastructures, and there's just systematic corruption. And so I said to myself, okay, with a blank slate of paper, how would I reinvent the Olympic Games? And after a few days, I was like, clearly, human enhancement has a lot of potential. Miami, everyone is enhanced,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
so common.
Yeah. No, I've been there.
It's
I
so
know what you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. Walk down South Beach, go to West Hollywood in LA,
Yeah.
Beverly Hills, right? People are enhanced,
Sure.
and our society and culture is changing. And so I said to myself, you know what? There's something in it. So I wrote the business plan. I spent 5 or 6 days writing it, and I've spent New Year's Eve with Peter Thiel almost every year
Okay.
for the last 15 years. And I went to the New Year's party, and I said, I'm thinking about my next company.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, what is it? And I said, it's an enhanced version of the Olympic Games. And he said, say no, sounds really cool.
Yeah. So
And I knew then I was onto something special.
sure. So tell me, how did you and actually, if you don't mind me asking, how did you and Peter Thiel become acquainted? Was it because of the litigation with Gawker Media, or like what was kind of the origin story to that relationship, and how beneficial has that been for you?
Well, I was a 24-year-old law student at Oxford University. It was my first week, and Peter came to give a lecture on campus. And we had a mutual friend in common from New York who had like connected us, I think, on Facebook back then. This is 2009,
Okay.
and I showed him around the campus, right? And this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
He was a successful entrepreneur, but not as recognized as he is today. And we had just started talking, and he said, I asked him a very important question, which I'll never forget. I said, Peter, you're a billionaire. You must not have any problems, but what's your biggest problem, and what can I do to solve it? And he was like, oh, sigh. There's this tabloid, and they're writing this terrible stuff about me, and they just won't stop,
Mm.
and it's all lies. I'm like, oh, well, why don't you just sue them? And he said, oh, if I sue them, it'll just bring more attention. They'll make it worse. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, this is one in the world, and this is his problem. I said, well, what have you thought about doing? He said, well, I'm thinking about buying them for $30 million. I said, it's a terrible idea. You're rewarding bad behavior.
Yeah.
So I said, have you thought about, there's someone out there who wants to sue them but doesn't have the resources and paying for their lawsuit, and you could engineer like a proxy war? And he's like, I've never thought about that. I said, let me go and put my head to work, and I'll write you a memo on how to do it. And he's like, great, I really like appreciate that. And so then a few weeks go by, and I get a message from him. He was like, oh, I'm going to be in Berlin. Do you want to have dinner?
Yeah.
And like continue chatting. So I flew out to Berlin on a like a $30 EasyJet flight.
Sure.
And I said to him, here's the plan. It's perfectly legal for you to fund a third party claimant's lawsuit. This is how I would do it, structures of shell companies, etc. And he said, how much and how long would it take to bankrupt Gawker? And I said, 5 years and $10 million. And like, remember, I'm a 24-year-old
Yeah.
kid at this
Yeah.
time. He's just like, great, go and do it. Where do I send the money?
Get to work. Yeah.
And get to work. And we just did it. Right. And I always thought that every billionaire is like that. They're just like decisive. They do whatever they want.
Snap their fingers.
That's, you think they can just snap their fingers and do whatever they want. That's in fact not true at all. Most billionaires would be like, oh, what would the New York Times write about me? What would people at the country club think? Right? They're very risk adverse. They're very protective of their brand. What's special about Peter is that he's decisive. He doesn't care what people think about him. He cares about being right.
Sure.
And he's been proven time and time again. He was attacked so much. He was made a pariah in Silicon Valley for supporting Donald Trump in 2016. And now you see every tech CEO,
jumping on the bandwagon.
Is on the bandwagon,
So
absolutely.
I was gonna
Um,
ask just to clarify for people who don't know, like these Gawker Media, don't feel sorry for them. They're not good people. Like the stuff that they said about Peter is also, I mean, just their whole brand of journalism was basically, if you can call it journalism, was basically to smear. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron. Like to smear like celebrities or entrepreneurs or basically famous people with any kind of like scandalous gossip that they could get their hands on and publish. So these are not like reputable journalists that were driven out of business. These were, mischievous
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, these were people who made a business of publishing sex tapes
Yeah.
that were surreptitiously. And so what closed them down was that they published a sex tape of Hulk Hogan having a fully consensual relationship with his best friend's wife that was illegally filmed. And they mocked him for it. And they actually invented the term clickbait. They
Okay.
were so proud of inventing clickbait.
Yeah.
And we won a $140 million judgment against them. And it's subject of a best-selling book that everyone could read about called Conspiracy by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Uh, and a Netflix documentary and a forthcoming movie that I believe is starring Matt Damon.
Oh, I didn't know about the movie. Okay, I'll have to look into that. You know what it's called?
Yeah, I believe it's called Killing Gawker.
Killing Gawker.
You
Okay.
can read it.
I wonder what the people who ran Gawker are gonna think about that movie. That's good. It got to be tough for them to see that go down. But
It's like we won.
yeah,
It was very resounding victory.
yeah, as it should be. But just to get back onto your story, so I just find it interesting because with the reason I'm asking these questions is it's very clear that from the beginning you've been this like problem solver. Like you took Peter's problem and you created a solution. You talk about how every year you take some time to write down kind of the next big challenge that you're going to overcome. Like for aspiring entrepreneurs, for people who haven't reached your level of success yet, in not just your field, but in a number of different fields, it seems like this method, you have a method here that can be applied across the board. Like, talk to us a little more about just kind of your method and approach in sort of business that can also just be applied to like other situations as well. Like the way that you think through challenges and solutions. Like, where do you get that from?
I think the simplest thing that people can do to be successful is to be reliable. And this is like sounds very, very simple, but it's actually very hard to do, right? So, if you say you're going to show up to dinner with your friends at 7 o'clock, be there at 7 o'clock, be there at 6:55, right? Be on time. One thing I see so often is people who show up late for job interviews. Like, if you can't do the smallest thing, like show up on time for a Zoom interview, do you think you're going to be able to put on the next Olympics?
Mm,
Should I pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year?
yeah,
Be an unreliable cog in this important machine? Of course not.
sure.
And so, why has Peter backed every company that I have built? Because when I was 24 years old, he asked me how much and how long it would take to bankrupt Gawker. And in 10 seconds, I calculated in my brain it would take 5 years and $10 million. It took exactly 5 years, and it cost exactly $10 million. I was reliable. I
Yeah.
delivered on time, and you do that over and over again, you will be successful, because reliability, the more reliable you are, the more responsible you are. However, young people today, or I think many people in general, don't like the term responsibility. They feel it's a weight of the world upon them.
Mm,
However, there's another word for responsibility, and that's power. The
mm,
more responsible you are, the more powerful you are. So with great power comes great responsibility, and with great responsibility comes great power.
yeah.
And the only way you are being trusted with anything in this world is by being reliable. And you can do that in the smallest ways, and it becomes this compounding thing. And most people are deeply unreliable.
And so it's like doing because right, I think oftentimes we want the kind of the big laurels, the big awards, the big accomplishments, but we don't. It's like, you have to be able to be trusted with a little before you can be trusted with a lot, right? It's kind of that biblical maxim of like just, when you're given something small, and like how do you behave with the small things and how that translates to those bigger building blocks. You talked about being on time and just being reliable, and that one situation you described leading to the bigger moments, right? But it's the little unseen things, right, that go on underneath the surface that you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'll give you another example. I get 600 plus emails every day. I read every single one of them and I reply to every relevant email. I get to inbox zero every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I respond to every WhatsApp message, every text message, because every email that comes into my inbox is an opportunity. And I take it all very, very seriously. I give my email out all the time. My email is Aron, ARON, @enhanced.com. If anyone is interested in collaborating with us in any way, shape, or form, just drop me a line. I'll reply to you. I'll connect you with the right person on my team.
All right.
And that is an absolute superpower because most CEOs are drowning in email and instant messages, right? And building workflows and systems so that you can actually respond to all of the opportunities that come about is something that is very, very rare. And it's the strength of the operation which we can deliver. And I have no doubt that if someone from the International Olympic Committee, which is our direct competitor, walked into my office and saw the quality of people who are working here and the diligence in which they work, they would be shocked. They would say, well, we just better shut up shop now because there's no way we're going to be able to compete with that organizational culture. And I think it's very simple.
Well, you talk about
Being a
organizational.
founder, yeah. So being a founder is a really tough job,
Yeah.
right? That one moment's hard, but actually it becomes really easy when you get the formula right. And in my view, the formula is very simple. I need to hire the very best people in the world, not good people, not even great people, but the best people in the world. I need to retain and incentivize those people. And most importantly, I need to make them work as a team. And if I can recruit the very best people in the world, I can absolutely change the world because that's all it is. And the reason why Tesla has a greater market capitalization than basically every other car manufacturer in the world combined is for the fact that they are the number one choice of employer of engineers of any company in the world. So that's why they can build robots. That's why they can build self-driving cars. And they can build the best technology because they can hire the best people.
So yeah, you just answered the question I was going to ask, which is how do you create that organizational culture? But it sounds like you just described it in terms of incentivizing the best people to not only want to come to you but to want to stay with you. And I'm sure that takes sacrifice, right? There's a give and take of there's a reason why not everybody's been able to replicate what's been done with Tesla, right? Because I'm sure there were sacrifices and investments that Musk made that others were unwilling to make at the time. And I'm sure that for you, creating organizational culture with enhanced games, that as you talk about, is outpacing the rival body. Like you're making sacrifices and you're making investments in people that others might not appreciate, right? Like there's a process that goes to work there that takes time.
Well, yeah. So the mission of the organization is crucial to recruiting top talent. Like, are you going to dedicate your whole life and sacrifice everything to be a product manager at Microsoft? Of course not. No one is going to write product manager at Microsoft on their tombstone. Many people will write on their tombstone that they were an Olympian. And I hope they will say the same about contributing to building the enhanced movement. And so that mission, that mission to do something truly great, like Elon, occupy Mars.
Sure.
Right. The world is dominated by simple ideas. And the simple idea that Elon articulates so well is occupy Mars. Sam Altman, artificial general intelligence. Aron D'Souza, superhumanity, right?
Yeah.
Why would you work somewhere where you were just contributing to making the rich get richer, right? Contribute to somewhere that's actually making a meaningful difference in the world. So that's number one. That's the recruitment piece. Retention is mainly about financial incentives. Right? Pay people enough money that they can live well, but not so well that they become decadent. give them enough equity upside, they're long-term greedy and build something truly extraordinary. But the third part, organizational culture, this is the hardest one, right? It's very comparatively easy for me to be disciplined enough that I show up on time, be extremely reliable, answer all my emails every day. But try getting like a 20, 30, 40 person organization where everyone is at that level of reliability, right? It's an amazing group of people to work with, but very, very few organizations are able to do that. And we do that through rigorous training and selection and leading from the top, right? If you're a CEO and you're telling your staff you need to show up on time, well, you need to show up on time yourself. You're going to tell your staff they need to work late and strive harder. You need to be the first in the office and the last to leave.
Yeah.
You have to lead by example.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of CEOs seem to miss that. Like the in person setting the example, and kind of there's the kind of the football coach who's actually doing the workout with the team, right? And that's kind of the mentality that you seem to be describing there. Now, I do imagine that in the course of, well, you already told me, but in the last couple of years, how much stigma and entrenched opposition you've encountered in the athletic world and in the obviously with the Olympic body, but also just in general in the public eye to enhance games and just getting people on board with this. I mean, you talked about the first round of investors basically turning their noses up at this, saying, no one will ever get on board with this thing. I mean, you overcame all that and you got to where you are now. I mean, how do you plan to, and how do you plan to continue have an approach and a mindset and a level of determination that breaks that stigma, that entrenched opposition over time, and with the recognition that that you're not going to see the fruit of this right away? Like what kind of like fires that for you?
Simply that there is a mission at hand, right? That we have committed to, not just myself, but my entire team. We're going to build superhumanity. And if I'm there on my deathbed, dying of old age and frailty, I probably will say to myself, well, Aaron, you failed because you should have solved this. But I feel I'm better placed to solve the problem of aging than anyone in the world. I'm not a scientist, right? I'm not a clinician, but the enhanced games and the water enhanced movement is creating the market conditions by which policymakers can change regulation, that public discussion, the public consciousness will change, and that will create the incentives for research and development. And so this is a mission of life or death.
Yeah.
This is a mission of life or death, not just for myself, but for everyone in this world. And this is the survival of our species. And that's what gets me up every morning, right? And it is difficult. There are many days where there are challenges presented that come across my desk, but it is that mission that gets me through it, to believe that we are doing something truly important for the trajectory of humanity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine that it's one thing to persuade, a casual viewer, let's say, of sports or something, to get on board with this. I think that's one thing, but I have to imagine that it's tough probably to have peers of yours, people who, have been in this field for a long time, kind of looking at you and saying, like, Aaron, like, I'm sorry, but like, you can't do this. It's just not going to work. And I know that, this has been true of a lot of people who have adopted revolutionary ideas and companies, whether it was, Elon Musk having his sort of the people he looked up to in terms of space travel, telling him that, he couldn't, do space travel the way that he eventually started to do it at SpaceX, and basically, Armstrong and the others saying, this is just not going to work. And having that kind of discouragement, and just people through history who had peers and mentors tell them, like, hey, this isn't going to work. Like for you, like just day to day, like, I mean, is that tough for you, or is that just not something you even think about?
Like I built lots of businesses. I had the best lawyers in the world tell me when I was 24 years old that, a young man like you who has no experience has no right whatsoever to be like prosecuting a case like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whatever, I'm just gonna go and do it. Right? You can't tell me. And now they're like, wow, you're such a distinguished lawyer and blah, blah, blah. But I was actually doing a survey about this, and I'm working on writing a paper about it, because the time from fiction, from science fiction to scientific reality is getting shorter and shorter. So Jules Verne wrote From Earth to the Moon in the 1850s. It was the first work of science fiction, and it was the first time it was ever postulated that man could land on the moon. And within 110 years, that had been proven correct. The idea of like artificial intelligence was like only conceptualized in like, 2001 A Space Odyssey. That's less than 60 years ago, and we're here today. The Jetsons come up with the idea of like the robotic vacuum cleaner. I think it's called Betsy. And, Dyson makes that a reality, Roomba, right?
Yeah.
Less than 40. The smartwatch, Dick Tracy, right? Less than 40 years from, Dick Tracy to the Apple Watch. And the concept of superhumans have been around, really, I'd say the 70s and the 80s. The idea of like comic book heroes, Radioactive Man, or the X-Men. And, maybe it's 50 years. So the time is now. And the regulatory framework, which I think is the principal impediment, is eroding. Robert F. Kennedy, who is soon to be confirmed to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services, is an enhanced human. Look at him. The guy is in stellar shape, and he's in his mid 70s.
Yeah.
Why? Because he uses testosterone replacement therapy, which would get him banned from Olympic competition.
Are you hoping, on that note with RFK, I mean, I don't know if you've reached out to him, but are you hoping that he'll be possibly an advocate for enhanced games to some extent in some capacity, or not so much?
I will say that I have very close ties with the administration, and I've been very fortunate to be called upon to advise them on many levels over the years. And we look forward to making an announcement about that in the next few weeks and months.
All right, well, stay tuned. You'll have to let me know on that one. Last question I have for you is just like kind of going forward with this idea of like sort of superhuman, this future of superhumanism. And I mean, this has been something, as you said, that has been only realistically talked about for a shorter period of time. But I mean, for a lot of human history, we've toyed with the idea of superheroes and supervillains and, people from outer space or just people here with magical powers. But now that we're entering an era, as you said, where that distance is shortened between fiction and reality, right? Where we're looking at things like AI as now, as being a tool now that wasn't thought to be possible not too long ago, and other things. Like, do you anticipate realistically, like obviously, not everything's in your control, but do you realistically anticipate that this version of a superhuman society is something that could happen on some level in your lifetime, or is this something that's generations away in terms of like enhanced games being a regular common day, like no noticeable occurrence, just kind of a part of regular life? Like, is that something that you envision happening realistically in your lifetime? Or is this something that's generations away?
Like Sam Altman's a good friend of mine, and I've known, he's a protege of Peter Thiel also. And like, him describing ChatGPT even before it had a name 10 years ago was complete science fiction.
Yeah.
Total science fiction. And now it's everyday life. And the same is going to be true of superhumanity. We're going to say, oh, of course, like, in Miami, in West Hollywood, in Beverly Hills, it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly accepted. It's celebrated to be enhanced. And soon that's going to be available to everyone. And it's just a cultural shift. And I always say the enhanced games, we're in the business of changing culture.
Yeah. And the other thing I forgot to mention is the timeline for actually like a version of this, like even if it's not internationally recognized at the level of the Olympics yet, is there a timeline that you have, if I missed it, just in terms of like a competition to be held upcoming?
Yeah, first exhibition events will be held this year.
Okay.
So
And
my team is literally booking venues today, and we look forward to delivering a track and field and a swimming focused exhibition event this year to prove that superhumanity is possible.
Yeah.
And a cost efficient way that is equitable to athletes, and to host cities. And it's really exciting. And we're really moving ahead at a lightning pace.
Well, keep us posted on that one too. I'd be interested to know like when, but also where that's going to take place. And I'm sure there's a lot of interesting conversations going on with these athletes as well in terms of, the stigma that I'm sure they face, being a part of this, but kind of being the first ones to step forward. It's a very sort of revolutionary time for them to do this and to take that step. I'm sure it takes a lot of courage. So. Aron, really appreciate your time in coming on today. This is, again, a little outside the strike zone of what we normally do, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to do this with you. Really appreciate your time. I know you're an incredibly busy guy, and you probably have 600 more emails to respond to today. So I'll let you go, but I really appreciate you doing this, and I really hope that we stay in touch and can do another interview later on once this thing is in full swing.
Hey, you're wonderful. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you so much, Aron. Aron D'Souza, everyone. And that's another episode of Stay Classy. That's a wrap.